I worked at a warehouse for 5 years. I was the inventory supervisor. My routine was simple: check the shelves, organize the stock, and make sure everything was in place. The nights were quiet, just me and the dim lights. After losing my father, the warehouse felt like my second home, safe and familiar. A few weeks ago, things changed. I was in the back, sorting boxes, when I noticed a heavy metallic door. It was half hidden behind some pallets. I had never seen it before, which struck me as odd. It felt like my heart raced as I approached it. The handle wouldn't budge. It was locked. A chill ran down my spine. I should have left it alone. For the next week, I couldn't stop thinking about that door. It haunted me. Every time I passed it, I thought I heard whispers coming from behind it. My coworkers noticed I seemed distracted, but I brushed off their concerns. They couldn't know about the whispers. I went on my rounds, looking for any sign of what could be behind the door, but found nothing. Then I noticed strange markings on the floor, like they had been drawn recently. I never saw them before. The air felt heavy near that door, cold. I didn't understand why I couldn't shake that feeling. Curiosity urged me on. My coworkers said I was acting weird. I saw the worry in their eyes but didn't know how to explain it. Finally, I asked the warehouse manager about the door. "There's no door like that," he said, looking at me like I was crazy. I felt confused. Was I imagining it? I took a moment to doubt myself. Maybe I was losing it. That night, I stood alone in the warehouse, staring at the door. The lights flickered, and a deep cold hung in the air. I knocked lightly. "Is anyone there?" Silence answered me. I waited, feeling the tension stretch around me. Then I saw it. Something moved in the shadows. My heart raced as I leaned closer to the door. I pressed my ear against the cold metal. "Hello?" I whispered. A voice whispered back, soft but chilling. "Let me out." I jumped back, gasping. I turned around fast, but I was alone. The voice echoed in my mind, and I knew I couldn't ignore that door anymore. Every night since, I've felt its pull. I can't escape the whispers that follow me. Sometimes I hear them in my dreams, urging me to come closer, to open the door. I think about it all the time now. I wonder what's on the other side. I regret ever approaching it. I just wanted to know if it was real. Now, whatever lurks behind that door feels like a shadow over my life. I can't shake the feeling that I opened a door I shouldn't have, and I'll never find peace again. I just wish I hadn't looked. I spent the next few days on edge. The door loomed in my mind, more present than anything else at the warehouse. I found myself dragging my feet on my shifts, hoping I wouldn't be called to the back where the door waited. But curiosity mixed with fear was a potent combination. I couldn't stay away. When I returned to work, a package had arrived, large and unmarked. My boss asked me to handle it. It was my job after all. But as I opened the box, my stomach twisted. Inside lay a collection of strange, rusted tools, each one worn and coated with dust. But what caught my eye most was a small metal box tucked in the corner. I pulled it out gently. The surface was engraved with symbols. They looked like the markings I'd seen on the warehouse floor near the door. A sense of dread began to creep in. Why were these tools here? And why was there no explanation for them? As I examined the box, the whispers from the door echoed in my mind. "Let me out." The words felt more real now. I glanced around. Nobody else seemed to notice anything strange. They were busy with their tasks, focused. I was on my own. I had to know more, so I took the box home that night. I hid it under my bed, hoping to find answers later. I knew I was crossing a line, but it felt like the only way to break the hold that door had on me. That evening, as I sat in my dimly lit apartment, I opened the box. Inside there were old photographs and a faded map of the warehouse. I focused on the images, heart sinking with every turn of the page. It showed the warehouse as it used to be, a factory. Workmen stood by the machines, sweaty and grim. But in the background, the same metallic door stood without disguise, a stark reminder from the past. I traced the map lines with my fingers. There was a marking that wasn't there in today's layout, a small room right next to the door. It indicated a basement. My heart raced. Had I stumbled onto a secret? Could there be something hidden beneath the surface, something that had been forgotten? That night, sleep didn't come easy. I tossed and turned, the images from the photographs replaying in my mind. I imagined what was in the basement, and what it could mean. When the sun finally rose, it brought clarity. I needed to investigate this further. I returned to the warehouse early, just after dawn. The stillness felt heavier than usual. I headed toward the marked spot on the map, excitement mixed with trepidation, and there it was, a trapdoor, partially concealed under a pile of cardboard boxes. I knelt down, my hands trembling as I brushed away the dust. The latch was rusty and made a screeching noise as I pulled it open. A dark hole gaped before me, and the odor of damp earth wafted up. I peered into the darkness, nerves coiling tight inside me. I had to know. But what if what lay below was worse than I imagined? Then I heard it. A soft, strained whisper from deep within. "Let me out." My instincts screamed for me to flee, but my feet felt rooted to the ground. I couldn't back away now. I knew I had crossed a point of no return. The call was too strong. Hesitation gripping tightly around my heart, I leaned closer to the abyss, ready to descend. As I lowered myself into the darkness, the chill of the air wrapped around me like an unwelcome embrace. I steadied my breathing, trying to quell the pounding in my chest. With each step down the rickety ladder, I felt the whispers intensifying, like a low hum growing louder with every inch I descended. The basement was cramped and smelled of rot. My flashlight pierced the shadows, revealing walls lined with old crates and machinery, their remnants covered in decades of dust. My heart raced. It wasn't just the fear of what I could find. It was the thrill of discovering something hidden, something long forgotten. Moving deeper, I spotted an old workbench with rusted tools strewn about. I brushed my fingers over the surface, feeling the rough texture of metal and wood. That's when I noticed something on the wall behind the bench, an old, faded painting. It depicted workers, but their faces were twisted, almost unnatural. Their eyes seemed to follow me, pleading for something I couldn't grasp. A chill ran down my spine. Then I saw it, a locked cabinet tucked into the corner. It looked out of place, like it had been left behind in a hurry. The old lock hung crookedly, as if someone had tried to force it open long ago. My curiosity flared again. What could be inside? I hesitated, looking back at the ladder. I could still escape, but the whispers grew more insistent. "Let me out!" The voice cracked and echoed, and I felt an unseen force urging me forward. I stepped closer to the cabinet. My fingers brushed the cold metal lock, and I felt a surge of energy pass through me as I turned it. To my surprise, it clicked open. I pulled the door ajar, and a cloud of dust billowed out, making me cough. Inside lay a collection of items that chilled me to the bone, old photographs, similar to the ones I had seen in the box. But these were different. They showed the faces of former workers, but each image had been marred, a red circle drawn around their eyes. I fumbled through them, heart racing. Among the photographs there was a small journal, its leather cover cracked. I opened it, flipping through the pages covered in hurried scrawls. They spoke of strange happenings, of workers disappearing, of something lurking within the walls of the warehouse. The last entry sent shivers up my spine. "If you hear the whispers, don't listen." I slammed the cabinet shut, my breath coming in quick bursts. The whispers began again, louder now, as if mocking me. "Let me out." Panic surged through me. I realized I wasn't alone. Something else lurked within the shadows. Breathing heavily, I turned to leave but froze. A shadow moved across the far wall. I wasn't just hearing things. Someone, or something, was down here with me. The urgency overtook me. I needed to escape, and fast. As I turned to climb back up the ladder, the ground trembled beneath me. The whispers morphed into a deafening chorus that echoed through the basement. I stumbled, grabbing for the rungs, desperate to escape the growing sense of dread. I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever had been trapped in this basement was ready to break free. I reached the top, pulling myself out into the safety of the warehouse. My heart raced as I slammed the trapdoor shut. I stood there breathless, knowing I had uncovered something far more terrifying than I had ever imagined. And whatever was below wouldn't remain hidden for long. I backed away from the trapdoor, my heart still hammering in my chest. The memories of what I'd just seen played through my mind like a broken record. I could still hear the whispers, but this time they faded into a haunting silence, leaving me shaken and alert. I glanced around the warehouse. Nothing seemed out of place, yet I felt the weight of unseen eyes watching me. The remnants of machinery and stacks of boxes cast jagged shadows across the floor, morphing shapes into nightmares. I shook my head, trying to clear my thoughts. I had to focus. I needed answers, and I knew there had to be someone who could help. I hurried to grab my phone, but then I hesitated. What would I even say? I decided to talk to Gary, the manager. He had been working here long enough to know the history of this place. Maybe he had heard the rumors. I found him in his office, hunched over paperwork. As I knocked on the doorframe, he looked up, surprise flashing across his face. "Hey, you look like you've seen a ghost." "Something's going on in the basement," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "I found a locked cabinet, and there were pictures. Odd things." I hesitated, unsure how to explain the whispers. "Have you ever heard anything strange down there?" His expression shifted. Gary leaned back in his chair, folding his arms. "You're not the first to mention it. Some of the old-timers talk about hearing things, but they all laugh it off as stories. It's just an old building, right?" I swallowed hard. "But what about the workers who went missing? The journal?" His eyes narrowed. "You found a journal?" I nodded. I recounted the details, my words tumbling out in a rush. As I spoke, I could see skepticism creeping back into his demeanor. "Listen, a lot of people left abruptly during those years. Layoffs, jobs elsewhere. It happens in warehouses like this. But if you really feel something's off, maybe we should check it out together. Just to ease your mind." A twinge of hope surged within me. "Yes, let's go." We walked back to the basement, my heart pounding with every step. Gary held a flashlight, its beam cutting through the dark, illuminating the entrance. As we descended the ladder, the air felt thick and heavy, a stark contrast to my earlier descent alone. When we reached the bottom, I turned to Gary. It was right here. I moved toward the cabinet, but panic knotted my stomach. What if the whispers returned? I hesitated for a moment before pushing the door open again. To my shock, it was empty. The photographs and journal were gone, as if they had never existed. "What did you expect to find?" Gary asked skeptically, shining the flashlight around the basement. "There's no magic down here." I felt anger rising. "No, it was here! I swear!" Suddenly, we heard it. The faintest whisper echoed through the darkness, sending chills racing up my spine. It wasn't just in my head. Gary's expression shifted from confusion to outright concern. "Did you hear that?" The whispers became clearer, wrapping around us like a fog. "Let me out." I turned to Gary, fear etched into my face. "We need to leave. Now." But as we scrambled for the ladder, the ground trembled again. The whispers intensified, drowning out everything else. I felt a presence so cold it cut through my skin. Something was close, something ancient and angry. Just as we reached the top, the whisper transformed into a deafening roar. "Let me out!" In that moment, I knew whatever I had unleashed was not ready to stay hidden. As we burst out of the basement, I felt a surge of relief wash over me. We made it back to the main floor, but I couldn't shake the sense of dread clinging to my skin. Gary was muttering something under his breath, his flashlight flickering as he swept it back down the ladder. "Did you see that?" he said. It was like the air shifted. I don't know what I saw, but it felt real. My hands trembled. I couldn't stop thinking about the whispers, the desperate cries. Something was down there. I could feel it in my bones. We need to call the police, I said, not fully convinced myself. If folks went missing— No, Gary practically shouted. You can't just go throwing around accusations like that. What if it turns out to be nothing? We'll just end up looking foolish. His voice trembled slightly, and I realized he was just as scared as I was. But what if it's not nothing? I shot back, frustration bubbling up. What if someone is in danger down there? Gary hesitated, a look of conflict crossing his face. Finally, he sighed. Let's just give it a day. Maybe we can check if anyone's really missing. If we hear anything else, we can talk to someone then. I didn't like it, but I couldn't force him to act against his will. We parted ways, and I walked to my car, the night air biting. I started the engine and headed down the empty road, my mind racing. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The next morning, I pulled into the parking lot, hoping to find Gary. I wanted to convince him to go back down, but he wasn't there, and the warehouse felt eerily quiet. I walked around, feeling the anxiety knot up in my stomach. Where was everyone? Just as I turned to leave, I noticed something glimmering near the entrance of the building. I approached cautiously. It was a small silver keychain, engraved with a name I didn't recognize. Marcus. A cold chill crept over me. I slipped it into my pocket, a sense of foreboding simmering inside. Who was Marcus? Another worker? Had he gone missing? I made my way to Gary's office, a sense of urgency pushing me forward. I knocked on the door, but it swung open to reveal an empty office. His desk was in disarray. Papers were strewn about, with the chair tipped over. Gary? I called out. There was no response. Panic bubbled up again. I quickly checked the break room. No one was there. Then I remembered the basement. Had something happened to him? It was impossible to push the thought aside. I was out of options. I needed to know what was in that space again, and I had no choice but to return. I dashed towards the basement, my heart racing. As I reached the ladder, the whispers began again, softer this time, but unmistakable. They wrapped around me like shadows. Help me! I gripped the ladder, determination coursing through my veins. I'm coming! I shouted into the void. I took a deep breath and descended into darkness once more, hoping to find answers. But the moment my foot hit the ground, I realized I wasn't alone. Someone, or something, was down there with me. The instant I touched the cold, damp ground, I froze. A low growl echoed through the vast basement, punctuated by shuffling sounds. My heart dropped. I had expected darkness and whispers, not the presence of something else lurking in the shadows. I backed up instinctively, my eyes straining to make out any shape in the dim light of my flashlight. It flickered, a reminder of how fragile my situation was. I called out again, louder this time. Who's there? But all I got in return was an eerie silence. Then, from the corner of my eye, I saw movement. I swung the flashlight in that direction, and there it was. Squatting low against the wall was a figure, hunched and dangerous-looking. My breath caught in my throat. I couldn't tell if it was human or something else entirely. "Are you Marcus?" I asked, my voice trembling. It seemed absurd to ask, but I was desperate. The figure turned slowly, eyes glinting in the flashlight's beam. It was not Marcus. I couldn't tell how old or young it was, and its face was twisted in a way that made my stomach turn. It didn't respond, but I could see its lips moving, whispering something I couldn't quite hear. Without thinking, I took a step back. My foot landed on something that cracked beneath me. I looked down. It was a bone. The realization sank in, and panic surged through me. I spun around and bolted for the ladder. I couldn't stay here any longer. Whatever that thing was, it was not friendly. As I scrambled up the ladder, I heard a sudden crash behind me. I didn't stop to look, I only climbed faster. The growling escalated into a roar, shaking the entire basement. I threw myself onto the main floor and slammed the door shut behind me, locking it as I gasped for breath. That was when I noticed the tile wall had begun to crack at the seams. My mind raced to what I had just witnessed. Did Gary see this? Did anyone know? Hastily, I stepped back, my body still tingling with adrenaline. I needed answers, and there was only one person I could think of who might help: Lena, our former manager. She left the warehouse under strange circumstances. I grabbed my car keys with shaky hands and rushed out the door. The sun was setting, streaking the sky with colors that belied what I had just gone through. The drive to Lena's house felt too long, my thoughts spiraling as I recalled the whispers, the figure, the disturbing realization about the bones. I banged my hands on the steering wheel, clouded with guilt. If Gary was in danger down there, it was partly because I hadn't pushed harder for action. Just as I pulled up to her address, I noticed something odd. The front porch light flickered, just like the flashlight in the basement. I stepped out of the car, apprehensive. A tight knot twisted in my stomach. That's when I heard it. A familiar, desperate whisper seeping through the air. "Help me." My heart plummeted. This time, the voice was unmistakable. "Gary," I shouted, stepping forward with dread washing over me. I wasn't sure what I would find, but I had to act. As I reached the door, a shadow passed by the window, and I knew I wasn't alone anymore. I pressed my ear against the door, straining to catch any sound from inside. The whisper came again, more urgent this time. "Help me." My pulse quickened as I tried the doorknob. It turned easily. I hesitated, then pushed the door open. The entryway was dark, and the flickering light from the porch barely illuminated the space inside. I stepped in, the floor creaking beneath my weight. "Gary?" I called, my voice steadier than I felt. Silence followed, thick and heavy. I took a cautious step forward, glancing around. Pictures hung crooked on the walls, and the air smelled stale, almost moldy. Everything felt off. Then, just beyond the dim hallway, I noticed a faint light flickering in a room further down. It was barely visible, like a heartbeat in the dark. The whisper faded again, but I could still feel the desperate energy behind it. I moved toward the light, my heart pounding in my chest. Each step felt like a leap into the unknown. It was almost comforting to focus on the sound of my own footsteps, grounding me as I approached. As I reached the doorway, I paused and took a deep breath. The light flickered again, and I peered in. What I saw made my stomach twist. The room was filled with old furniture, covered in sheets, but in the center there was a table, and atop it lay a figure. It took me a moment to process who it was. Gary. He was tied up, his expression twisted in pain. "Help me," he gasped, eyes wide with fear. "Gary!" I rushed in, frantically looking for a way to free him. Just as I approached, a low growl reverberated from behind me. I turned slowly, dread creeping through me. The figure, the same twisted shape from the basement, loomed in the doorway. "You shouldn't have come here," it hissed, the air growing colder. Panic surged through me. I stepped back, my body instinctively moving to shield Gary. "What do you want?" I blurted out, my voice trembling. "Let him go!" The creature tilted its head, its eyes glinting in the dim light. It took a step closer, emanating a suffocating darkness. My mind raced. I had to think of something, any distraction to buy us time. "Please," I said, voice barely above a whisper. "I just want to help him." But it didn't seem to care about my plea. "He belongs to me now," it snarled, its lips curling back to reveal jagged teeth. Suddenly, Gary's face shifted from horror to something else. Was it defiance? "No!" he shouted, urgency in his tone. "Run! Don't stay!" Before I could process his words, the creature lunged forward. I grabbed Gary's arm, pulling him back, and we stumbled toward the exit. The growl morphed into a roar that echoed through the house, vibrating in my bones. Just as I reached the door, everything went dark. My heart raced. I couldn't see. I felt the cold grip of fear surrounding me again. And then I heard another voice, screaming from within the walls. "You shouldn't have opened the door." I understood in that moment. It hadn't just been Gary in danger. Something much larger was awakening, and I had just unleashed it. I stumbled out of the darkness and into the cool night air. Breathless, I dragged Gary with me, not stopping until we reached the safety of the porch. My heart pounded in my chest, and I felt sick with fear. I glanced back at the door, half expecting the creature to come barreling out after us. But the house stood silent, ominous under the moonlight. "Are you okay?" I turned to Gary, fear clawing at my insides when I saw his face. It was pale, drenched in sweat, and his hands were bruised from the ropes that had bound him. "I thought I was going to die in there," he gasped, his voice shaking. "You shouldn't have come. It's dangerous." "I couldn't just leave you," I replied, my voice low. But I felt the weight of his words. What had I unleashed? I glanced back at the door again, the shadows moving slightly as if inviting me back inside. "What was that thing?" Gary shook his head, his eyes wide with terror. "I don't know. It wanted something from me." He swallowed hard, and I could tell he was fighting against the memories. "It said I belonged to it. I shouldn't have opened the door either." My stomach churned. "What do we do now?" Before he could answer, we heard a loud crash from inside the house. A shadow darted past the window, distorting the frame. My breath caught in my throat. The creature was still here. "We need to leave," Gary said, urgency pouring from his voice. "Now." Just as we turned to run, the door creaked open again. The space beyond it was thick with darkness, and the flickering light was gone. I felt the air grow heavy around us. Something was coming. "Go!" Gary shouted, shoving me forward. My body moved on instinct, but my mind raced. We had to do something. We couldn't just leave it behind. "We have to call for help." "No one will believe us," he protested, but panic was evident in his voice. "It doesn't work that way." That was when I stumbled upon the small window at the side of the house. It was slightly ajar, just enough for a desperate escape. "There," I pointed. "We can get out that way." Gary hesitated. The roar from the house reverberated again, like a warning. "You go first," he urged. "I'll hold it off." "No, I'm not leaving you." "Damn it!" he yelled, his voice raw. "If you want to live, trust me." I felt my heart shatter at the thought of him staying behind. But I also knew he was right. My hands shook as I climbed up to the window, feeling the risk pulsing in my veins. Just as I squeezed through the opening, I heard him call my name, a mix of desperation and determination. I turned for one last look, and the sight froze me in place. The creature loomed behind him, the darkness now spilling out of the house like tendrils searching for prey. "Go!" Gary yelled again, his voice echoing in the night. I crawled out, fear tearing at me as I dropped into the grass outside. I didn't look back, but the sound of the door slamming shut resonated in my ears like a death knell. I ran, knowing I had to figure out what this monster was and how to stop it. But I could still feel the cold gaze upon my back, waiting for the moment I would turn around. As I sprinted down the street, panic gripped me. I could hear its whispering in my mind. "You should never have opened the door." Something stirred in the depths behind me. I had to find answers, quickly. I stumbled away from the house, my legs moving on autopilot as adrenaline coursed through me. Each step felt heavier, tethered to the dread that churned in my stomach. I had to focus, keep moving. I couldn't let fear drag me back. I took a breath, forcing my heart to slow. There had to be someone nearby, anyone who could help. As I reached the corner of the street, I spotted a light flickering in a nearby diner. It looked like a beacon of hope against the darkness. I pushed myself to go faster, my heartbeat thumping in my ears. When I reached the diner, a jingle announced my entry. The small bell above the door sounds like a chime from an old horror movie. The place was nearly empty, just a woman behind the counter and a few patrons nursing their cups of coffee. The smell of fries and burnt toast hit me, but I barely noticed. My mind was still back at that house. "Hey, are you okay?" The woman came around the counter, concern etched on her face. I must have looked like a ghost. I was shaking and covered in dirt from rolling out of that window. I need help," I stammered, my voice trembling. "My friend. He's still in that house. There's something in there. We have to—" "Slow down," she interrupted, her brow furrowing. "What house? What are you talking about?" Before I could respond, a crash echoed outside. The diner went quiet, and I turned to look through the window. My heart dropped. A figure stepped out of the shadows behind the diner, lit only by the streetlight. It was tall and impossibly thin, its long limbs twisting unnaturally as it moved. "What is that thing?" Panic washed over me. "It's coming," I whispered, more to myself than to anyone else. The woman grabbed my arm, pulling me back. "What are you seeing?" "No time! We need to get out!" I shouted, but she was frozen in place, her eyes wide. The other patrons hadn't noticed yet, but I knew we didn't have long. I sprinted toward the door, urging her to follow. "We have to go now!" I yelled again. Outside, the figure moved closer, gliding across the pavement like it was part of the night. A sound escaped my throat, desperate and raw. That's when I heard a familiar voice behind me. "What's going on?" It was Gary. Relief flooded through me until I saw his expression, confusion mixed with terror. I turned back toward the door. "Get inside. It's right there." But the woman finally broke out of her stupor, shaking her head. "No, you're all in danger. You need to leave town." The rest of her words were drowned out by an echoing shriek that cut through the night, paralyzing everyone in the diner. I turned to see the creature now inches away from me, its face a void, an absence of light that felt like it would consume everything. "Gary!" I screamed, my heart racing again. "What should we do?" But as I turned to him, my breath caught. Gary wasn't standing by the door anymore. The diner was empty now. The other patrons vanished without a trace. The woman behind the counter was also gone. "Gary!" I called again, fear gripping me. Then everything went dark. I blinked, disoriented, as consciousness slowly returned. I could feel the coldness clinging to me, the chill of an empty void. I was lying on the floor, the diner replaced by an obsidian expanse that stretched endlessly around me. Panic sunk in. "Gary!" I shouted, my voice swallowed by the suffocating darkness. It was then that I remembered the creature. I scrambled to my feet, heart racing, scanning the void for any sign of movement. The last thing I saw was that twisted form gliding toward me. But now, there was nothing, just silence. Is this what it felt like to be trapped? The thought sent a shiver through me, but I pushed it aside. I couldn't afford to fall into despair. "This isn't right," I muttered, trying to convince myself. There had to be a way out of this. "Help me," a voice echoed faintly, breaking the stillness. I froze, the words crawling into my mind. It was Gary. I took a deep breath, willing myself to follow the sound. I had to find him. Each step I took felt heavier than the last, as if something was trying to anchor me in place. My surroundings shifted with every movement. Shadows danced just out of reach, whispering secrets I didn't want to hear. "Let me out," they seemed to say, and I could feel their desperation mingling with my own. "Gary!" I called again, my voice barely a whisper against the thick darkness. "Where are you? Help me!" The voice trailed off, more distant now. I hurried toward it. The darkness was bearing down, the air too thick to breathe, yet something pushed me forward, yearning to break free. And then I saw it. A faint glimmer of light in the distance, a beacon pulling me in. I ran, my heart pounding, the whispers fading from my awareness. As I got closer, I could make out the shape of a door, slightly ajar. It pulsated with an energy that resonated deep within me. "Gary!" I screamed, the urgency fueling my stride. I hesitated only for a moment before pushing the door open. The moment I stepped through, blinding light engulfed me, and I stumbled, falling onto pavement. The air was suddenly crisp and cool, and I gagged, breathing in the world anew. Heart racing, I pushed myself up, gazing around. I was back outside the diner, the night sky sprawled above me. But then I noticed. The diner stood still, not a soul in sight, no patrons, no hash-slinging cook, just emptiness. Panic clawed at my insides again. Had it all been an illusion? Was Gary somewhere trapped in that darkness? "Gary?" I shouted, my voice hoarse. Nobody replied, and dread filled the silence. I took a few hesitant steps toward the diner, eyes scanning for any sign of life, but it felt like an echo of a dream I had slipped out of too quickly. Then the whispers returned. "You shouldn't have opened the door." I turned at the sound, instinctively backing away. That voice entwined with the coldness I had left behind. It clawed at my thoughts. Could this all be part of some terrible cycle? I stumbled back, searching for answers that kept eluding me. The familiar weight of the silver keychain I found earlier pressed against my palm. I pulled it out, staring at the engraved name. Marcus. There had to be a connection. But what could I do? I felt lost, disoriented. I needed to think fast. The horizon shimmered with illusions of leaving and staying. I wanted to flee, yet felt the call to return. Gary's face flickered in my mind, his plea resonating louder than before. What was happening? Then out of the shadows, a figure emerged, tall and twisted, its silhouette outlined against the moon. "You can't run from it," it whispered, that same dreadful echo clinging to the edges of my consciousness. It knew my fears, my regrets, and I felt it wrapping around me like a shroud, pulling me back, trying to swallow me whole. "What do you want?" I screamed, voice trembling. But the creature was already fading, dissipating like mist. I was alone, left with my thoughts and the uncertainty of whether Gary was lost, trapped by something I had unleashed. And just like that, the world fell silent again. I stood at the edge of a precipice, choices ahead of me blurred by shadows. I knew I had made that first choice to open the door, yet here I was, staring into the unknown, praying it wouldn't close behind me forever. I moved back toward the diner, heart pounding at the thought of confronting whatever lay within. It was still there. I could feel it, a low whisper promising anguish and truth. Would I find Gary? I had to try. I had to know. But the answers felt elusive, perhaps hidden behind the next door, yet haunted by the knowledge of a darkness that was hungry for freedom. I was caught in a web of choices, neither of which promised safety. As I took a step forward, a single thought sent a murmur through my mind. You were never meant to open that door. And yet, here I was, about to do it all over again,